What's up, ladies and gentlemen, and here we are taking a look at the Frost DK. Now, this spec is going to be very much in favor of the casual player. It's got very minimal buttons, and there's not a whole hell of a lot going on with this spec, but it still can get some good progressive damage. With this being said, throughout questing and stuff, I noticed that even though I could watch something completely different than what I was playing, it still played out alright. So let's go ahead and move on to the actual abilities so we can see how many there really are. So here we are taking a look at the Frost DK's abilities. Not a whole hell of a lot going on here. So we'll go ahead and start off like we normally do. Anti-Magic Shell. 1 minute cooldown. Surrounds you in an anti-magic shell for 5 seconds, absorbing up to 153,501 magic damage and preventing application of harmful. This is basically going to be the exact same thing as what we have on live, except damage absorbed generates runic power. So if you're a little bit more timed with this, you can actually get some decent runic power out, which you don't seem to suffer on the actual runic power itself, but in the runes, it plays out pretty nice. Chains of Ice shackles the target with frozen chains, reducing movement speed by 70% for 8 seconds. Again, not a hell of a lot of change here. It's going to work basically the same as on live. Control Undead. Dominates the target undead creature up to 103, forcing it to do your bidding for 5 minutes. Yeah, okay. Really, not a whole hell of a lot's changing in these first three. Dark Command's just going to be a basic taunt in case for some reason you need to taunt something off of the tank. Death Gate. This is going to return you to your class order hall. Death Grip. Yeah, it works the same. Basically, you're going to end up wanting to try and pull it to you. Obviously, I can't take a dummy for any particular reason, so... Ooh, get away from that thing. It's going to beat me to death. So, what do we have left? We have Death Strike. Death Strike's still going to do a basic amount of physical damage and heal you for 20% of all damage taken in the last 5 seconds. Minimum of 7% max health. They kind of put the whole tank spin on this one. Depending on how much damage you take. So Death Strike can be a little bit more progressively better instead of just after killing something while questing. Empower Rune Weapons had a slight change. Empower your rune weapon, immediately activating all your runes and generating 25 runic power. Not a whole hell of a lot, but this is going to be a main 3-minute cooldown. Frost Strikes out of your general rotation. Chill your weapons with icy power and quickly strike the enemy with both weapons, dealing a total of 38,000 frost damage. Now, we're going to kind of... There's Obliterate, Howling Blast. There it is. And there's Frost Strike. They've had a few decent little animations in their actual damage, but not a whole hell of a lot. And you can see that I've got procs left and right. We'll actually go over those here in a second. So our next one's going to be Howling Blast. Not a lot's changed here either. Blast the target with Frigid Wind, dealing X amount of frost damage to a foe and very little frost damage to all other enemies within 10 yards, infecting all targets with Frost Fever. Frost Fever is still a disease that deals X amount of frost damage over 24 seconds, has a chance to grant the Death Knight 5 runic power each time it deals damage. This is going to be Frost Fever is one of your main runic power generators, outside of actual melee, and anytime you use an ability, you end up actually, as long as it doesn't use runic power like Frost Strike, Obliterate's going to generate a decent amount of runic power also. So this is just something that you'll end up looking into a play style, which really plays back and forth a bit. And then you've got Icebound Fortitude. Instant 3-minute cooldown, still a very solid defensive cooldown. It's going to give you immunity to all stun effects and reduce all damage you take by 20% for 8 seconds. Mind Freeze, still your interrupt, works pretty damn good. Obliterate, the other of the three in your main core rotation. It's just a large attack that does good physical damage with both weapons. Obliteration's a talent, we'll go over that later. Path of Frost, same as on live, lets you walk on water, you and any party member that's around. Pillar of Frost. Even though it's a 1-minute cooldown, this is part of your core rotation, just because of the way that it plays out. The power of Frost increases your strength by 20% and grants immunity to external movement effects such as knockbacks. Last 20 seconds. I will go more into Pillar of Frost in the gameplay and cover some other areas in the talents later on, but just know that this is actually playing more into a core rotation than anything else. Raise Ally is still here. You basically still have your battle res. Nothing has changed in that aspect, but it's going to bring the target dead character back to life with 60% health and 20% mana. Remorseless Winter, just a very weak AoE. It has some interesting gameplay choices also, but it's instant 20-second cooldown, and drain the warmth of life from all nearby enemies, dealing decent frost damage over 8 seconds and reducing their movement speed by 50%. Rune Forging still here. Now the thing about Rune Forging is you only have 3 left. I believe this is the same as what's on live. I haven't played a DK on live in forever, so I'm not 100% sure, but you've got Razor Ice, you have Fallen Crusader, and you have Stone Skin Gargoyle. Now, these all basically work the same from what I remember, and Stone Skin Gargoyle is going to increase your armor by 4%, stats by 3 for your tank. Fallen Crusader is going to be a strength increase modifier. Basically, it heals you for 6%, increases the total strength by 25% for 15 seconds. So it plays off decently. And then Rune of Razor Ice, which is going to cause 10% extra weapon damage as frost damage and increase enemies' vulnerability to your frost attacks by 2%, stacking up to 5 times. What I ended up doing with this was actually I used Razor Ice on the main hand and Crusader on the offhand for just the general proc. I don't know if later on down the road, because there are some artifact choices that'll end up making it to where Razor Ice will actually do more damage, so we may be going double Razor Ice later on. So with that being said, Wraithlock, this is your new mobility spell. It is on a 1-minute cooldown, and basically it's going to increase your movement speed by 70% for 3 seconds, and during this time all movement impairing effects are suppressed, but attacking will cancel this effect. So basically you just turn into a ghost, and if you end up casting anything, it's going to pull you out of it. But it's a good little adjustment compared to the standard walk around like we're used to. Dark Secure is still here. When you kill an enemy that yields experience or honor, your next death strike within 20 seconds is free, and its healing is increased by 100%. Really a nice deal for constantly pulling mobs, and it works great in like open world gameplay to where you're actually out there and you're doing questing or anything. It keeps you alive, and you're just a non-stop murdering machine, really. Killing Machine, it's still here. Your auto attack critical strikes have a chance to make your next obliterate automatically critically strike. So this is making crit look like a very obvious choice for Frost yet again. And then your mastery looks pretty obvious also, increasing all frost damage done by 25%. On a Pale Horse is still here, just increases your mounted speed by 20%. Rhyme, your Obliterate has a 45% chance to cause your next Howling Blast to consume no runes and deal 300% additional damage. Again, still here, doing basically the same thing. Throws a very good rotation, well, not really a good rotation, but a third button into the rotation for you. And then Runic Empowerment. When you spend Runic Power, you have a 1% chance per Runic Power spent to gain a rune. So this is just helping you out as you end up going for your regen, and I did notice that this spec is quite spammy, but you're going to do, again, it's just a basic 3-button rotation in most situations. With this, guys, let's go ahead and move right into the talents, as this is the end of the abilities. Not very many. Alright, so here we are taking a look at the talents. Shattering Strike. If there are 5 stacks of Razor Ice on the target, Frost Strike will consume them and deal 50% additional damage. This is obviously going to help with Frost Strike's damage, but it's going to negate a lot of the other damage that you might end up seeing. Later on down the road, when you get the artifact power and you start getting more Razor Ice damage, this may end up being alright if you put it on both weapons, but I don't see this as being beneficial except for short bursty areas. As to where Icy Talons, Frost Strike also increases your melee attack speed by 10% for 6 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. This is pretty easy to keep up. As long as you're always balancing back and forth between Obliterate and Frost Strike, you should always have enough runic power to end up keeping this going, and it plays into it very nicely. And there's another ability that plays into this, with another talent, which I'll get into in just a second, that helps a ton with keeping up your attack speed. Murderous Efficiency, passive consuming the killing machine effect, has a 50% chance for you to gain 1 rune. Again, this plays nicely, but it didn't feel like it was doing as much damage as what Icy Talons was. So we'll move on. Level 57, Freezing Fog, passive, Howling Blast and Frost Fever deal 50% increased damage. You get a lot of different procs. I mean, you get a lot of rhyme procs, and this thing just absolutely tears shit up. I mean, there's no real yes or no, but Howling Blast, this is great in both single target and AoE situations. Then you have Frozen Pulse. While you have no full runes, your auto attacks radiate intense cold, inflicting additional frost damage on all nearby targets. This plays out pretty decent also, but the passive on it was a little less controlled, as to where you do end up generating quite a decent amount of runes. As you end up spending runic power, you're always going to end up seeing more runes, and there's very little time that I didn't actually have a rune available to cast something else. Horn of Winter. Blow the Horn of Winter, gaining 1 rune and generating 5 runic power. This is one of the short-term cooldowns that I was talking about. It's an interesting gameplay choice, but again, like I said, you really weren't suffering on rune regeneration or runic power usually at all. There's a few little times, but other than that, if you're able to keep Icy Talons up, along with the talent that we'll go over here in a minute, it was pretty simple. Ice Cap. Your Frost Strike and Obliterate criticals strikes reduce the remaining cooldown of Pillar of Frost by 1 second. Again, like I was saying, crit is looking pretty solid for this spec. Taking a 1 minute cooldown, alright, 60 seconds. You're going to more than likely, with a high enough crit, reduce that by half. So every 30 seconds, you're going to get to use Pillar of Frost. And it plays strongly into the spec, at least in a single target setup for this one. It was playing very well. And I noticed I was using it more as using Pillar of Frost more or less instead of like a cooldown as a ability, you know, like a long cooldown ability instead of just a actual damage cooldown. And then you've got Hungering Rune Weapon. It replaces Empower Rune Weapon. So you no longer have Empower Rune Weapon, it's just Hungering Rune Weapon. And what's it going to do? It's going to empower your rune weapon, gaining 1 rune and 5 runic power instantly in every 1.5 seconds for 9 seconds. Instead of just activating all your runes and generating 25 runic power. There's not a whole hell of a lot of change there, except instead of this activating all your runes and giving you 25 runic power right up front, it's going to do it over 9 seconds instead. Alright. Avalanche, passive. While Pillar of Frost is active, your melee critical strikes cause jagged icicles to fall on your nearby enemies, dealing 11,027 frost damage. Not a whole hell of a lot in a single target situation, but in AoE, this thing is pretty awesome. A-Bomb's Might, passive. Obliterate critical strikes have a chance to drive lesser enemies to the ground, stunning them for 2 seconds. Players are dazed for 5 seconds instead. This is an interesting gameplay also. Basically, if you're just pulling one target at a time, this plays out pretty well on never really taking any damage because Obliterate does have a pretty high crit chance. But again, this is just, with diminishing returns, it doesn't work so well, and it doesn't work on larger boss mobs. Blinding Sleet, instant, 1 minute cooldown. Targets in a cone in front of you are blinded, causing them to wander disoriented for 4 seconds. Damage may cancel the effect. Again, in a dungeon or PvE situation to where you're wanting to continue damaging, this doesn't really do a whole hell of a lot. Now, Winter is Coming, not only does it have a neat way of activating it, but it also does very well, and it ends up being a solid CC in most gameplay situations in a PvE scenario. So Winter is Coming is passive. Enemies struck 5 times by Remorseless Winter while your Pillar of Frost is active are stunned for 4 seconds. What this is going to do is it's going to stun them out for 4 seconds. Really interesting gameplay, and all you really end up doing, let's go ahead and see if I can get it to trigger on these guys. But you'll end up doing Pillar of Frost, and then you'll hit Remorseless Winter, and then you'll see there it goes. They all get stuck by the ice and frozen. Works out pretty solid between each pull. I mean, you can just go ahead and hit Pillar of Frost on cooldown anyways, because if it's up, you're kind of losing out on the benefit of Ice Cap here. You know, you constantly want to keep it on cooldown unless you're going straight into a boss after and you're not sure you're going to get enough to get it off cooldown before the pull. But really, with this and Remorseless Winter, you're going to get that AoE from Remorseless Winter anyways on these larger AoE pulls, and then you hit Pillar of Frost, and you're just going to wreck them down, and this is going to stop damage on anybody for that duration as long as they're being hit by Remorseless Winter. Played out very nice as a solid PvE CC. With that, we'll move on. 75, Volatile Shielding, passive. Your anti-magic shell turns your enemies' pathetic magic against them, absorbing 35% more damage, but generating no runic power. When it expires, 25% of all damage absorbed is dealt as arcane damage divided among nearby enemies. If you're taking a lot of caster damage for some reason, or if you're standing in AoE or something like that, and you want to end up turning this kind of like a redirect, it works out all right. But at the same time, I wasn't too interested in this shielding, just for the simple fact that you no longer get the runic power when it's done, and your core rotation plays out pretty decent. Permafrost, passive. When you deal damage with auto attacks, gain an absorb shield equal to 30% of the damage dealt. Then you've got things like this that are right next to it. And again, the auto attacks are going to be, with Icy Talons, this thing was constantly up. I had a lot of shielding. Then you've got White Walker. You take 20% reduced damage while Wraith Walk is active. When you enter or leave Wraith Walk, all nearby enemies are slowed by 50% for 3 seconds. Really, if you just need to run away, never surrender, god damn it. This ability just really sucks to me because I don't usually end up running. If I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die in a blaze of glory, but normally if you can end up killing one item, you can end up death striking and automatically saving your own ass. So it didn't seem like a choice for me. Maybe in the PvP area where you're trying to get somebody, kind of do a self-peel, this may end up working. Level 90, Frost Scythe. Now, after doing the math on this thing a little bit, in an AoE situation, this is basically like an AoE Obliterate. It does a sweeping attack that strikes all enemies in front of you for very little frost damage. The attack benefits from Killing Machine. Critical strikes with Frost Scythe deal 4 times normal damage. So if Killing Machine's up, this thing's automatically got a critical strike, and you're going to do 4 times damage. Now, what this equals out to, it's almost 100% right on the money with what Obliterate does single target, and this is just going to be a full cleave AoE. So if you wanted to be more AoE heavy, Frost Scythe's going to be the way to go, which kind of sucks because it is the extra ability, but it's really not a DPS gain to swap this one out for what Obliterate does. So, with that being said, Runic Attenuation, it's passive. Auto attacks generate 1 runic power. This is where I was going with Icy Talons. Get an additional 30% on top of your melee attack speed, you're swinging like crazy, and your auto attacks generate 1 runic power for each time. And again, never have a problem with runes or spending them at all because of this. Gathering Storms, passive. Each rune spent during Remorseless Winter increases its damage by 10% and extends it by 0.5%. Again, this is a good solid AoE choice. This is going to be your AoE, your single target, but this is probably the better if you're getting the procs. If you've got a high enough crit, Frost Scythe's more than likely going to be the better AoE choice just because of how much damage this thing can do. I mean, if you're hitting everything in front of you for the same damage as what a proc Obliterate's going to do, then that's going to be great. Level 100, Obliteration, and it's got a good name for a good reason. It's instant, 1.5 minute cooldown. For the next 8 seconds, every Frost Strike hit triggers Killing Machine, and Obliterate costs 1 less rune. The way this gameplay is going to turn out is when you hit this cooldown, you're basically going to hit Frost Strike, Obliterate, Frost Strike, Obliterate, Frost Strike, Obliterate. That's all you're going to hit over the next 8 seconds. And you can get in a good solid amount of damage. But really, it's pretty lame on how much damage you get through this thing for how little you actually end up having to do. So with that, let's go ahead and move on. But again, very solid in a single target situation. Breath of Cindergosa, instant 2 minute cooldown, continuously deal X amount of Shadow Frost damage every 1 second to enemies in a cone in front of you. Deals reduced damage to secondary targets. You will continue breathing until your runic power is exhausted, or you cancel the effect. Costs 12 runic power per second, and it's on a 2-minute cooldown. I played with it, I really did, and it's a channeled ability. It really doesn't play well if you are going Icy Talons, because this is just, yeah, it's not that great. I mean, it's not channeled, but it's just going to waste out your runic power way too quickly, and then you're not going to be able to Frost Strike to keep Icy Talons up. It just didn't seem to play well with the design that I was going for in a single target situation. Then you've got Glacial Advance. It's 1 rune, instant, 13.5 second cooldown, reduced by haste. Summon glacial spikes from the ground that advance towards forward, each dealing X amount of frost damage nearby. Yep, so we're going to pull this out just so you can see it. There it is. And it goes straight from where you're at. Hold on, we'll let it come off the cooldown here so you can see it again. And do. There it is. And then I'll show you Breath of Syndragosa. Since it's a fairly decent cooldown, we'll do that one last. It's almost off cooldown, so I should be able to swap real soon. And here it is. Let me build up some, we're going to build up. Alright, that should be good enough. And there it is. Not too bad. And you can keep damaging through it, but it does end up spending your runic power quite quickly. And there you have it, guys. That's going to be the talents for the Frost Decay. Let's go ahead and move into actually taking a look at the artifact and what it does. Alright. As usual, we're going to take a look at some of the skins. And your base model is going to be Blades of the Fallen Prince. Let them spin around a little bit, but they're not too bad. I mean, they're like little mini Frostmournes. That's all they are. And then you got Frostmourne's Legacy. Getting a little bit better. Pretty beefy. And we'll let it spin around again. Just one more time. Turn for me, baby. Syndragosa's Fury. These are getting pretty solid, and you can see the bones of Syndragosa are actually used in the making of the blade. Really interesting. And then Gravekeeper, these are going to be your PvP ones. And they're a little more, I don't know, like edgy. They're beefed up. They definitely have that PvP look. But that's going to be your basic skins. Not a whole hell of a lot going on there. Some pretty good looking swords, but they do all kind of have the same characteristic. With that, let's go ahead and move on to the traits. Here we are looking at the traits. First thing first, I didn't go over an artifact ability because the actual artifact ability, the on-use ones, not until all the way down here, and we'll go over that in a second. But Crystalline Swords is your baseline ability. Your melee attacks have a chance to create icy copies of Icebringer and Frost Reaper, which will then stab and pierce your foes. So automatically they come out and actually do more damage for you, more melee damage. So what are we looking at with this? It's a real passive starting ability, keeps this thing extremely simple. With this, we'll go ahead and move on to the first thing as you walk out, and keep an eye out whenever I go over the gameplay up next. You'll end up seeing exactly where these are playing. You'll just see them randomly pop out, and it could be one blade, it could be both blades, but they just randomly pop up and start doing some damage. So the first thing you get passively as you end up, or the first rank I should say, is increase in attack speed by 8%. They really want you swinging out of control, and this is a good way to end up doing it. Nothing but the boots. Increases critical strike damage done by Obliterate and Frost Scythe by 10, 20, or 30%. Great damage increase. Frozen Core 0-1. Your Pillar Frost also increases frost damage dealt by 6%. Again, you're going to be using Pillar of Frost more as a core rotation ability than anything, so this is just more damage on top of it. Especially if you're running a good amount of mastery. Frozen Skin, rank 0-3, increases your armor by 3%. 3, 6, or not, or it'll probably be 3, 6, and 10. Dead of Winter increases damage dealt by Remorseless Winter by 5, 10, or 15%. Cinder Ghost's Fury, rank 0 of 1. This is a 5-minute cooldown that you end up getting, but it summons Cinder Ghosta, who breathes frost on all enemies within 40 yards in front of you, dealing X amount of frost damage and slowing movement speed by 50% for 10 seconds. This is almost 125% exactly the same as what Arthas's ability is in Heroes of the Storm. 5-minute cooldown on this thing, and really, I haven't tested it, so I can't say what's going on, but that's exactly what it sounds like to me. The one ability you get's a 5-minute cooldown, so there's not a whole hell of a lot on there, but it looks like it'll still end up doing some pretty decent AoE damage. Frozen Soul, rank 0-1. When Remorseless Winter ends, Icebringer and Frost Reaper release a burst of X amount of frost damage, increased by 100% of each additional enemy you hit during Remorseless Winter. So you get a little more AoE on top of that AoE. Overpowered, rank 0-3, Obliterate has a 10% chance to generate 3 additional runic power, and that's going to be 10, 20, and 30%, and I'm not sure if that's going to increase the additional runic power also, but I very highly doubt it. Cold as Ice, increase all damage you deal by 3, 6, or 10%. Really nice to end up seeing that additional frost damage, considering, again, with your mastery on there, that's gonna just improve even more. Ice in Your Veins, rank 0-3, Deathstrike heals for 100% more while Icebound Fortitude is active. So this is just going to be 100, 200, or 300%. And again, this is just a solid way to heal yourself up while you're using your defensive already. If you're using your defensive, you're more than likely going to need some additional healing. Chill of the Grave, increase the range of Frost Strike by 8 yards. Really, that's not a necessary, because you're usually in melee, but this is going to help, especially if you took Icy Talons. If you have to run away, you can usually end up keeping it up because you're not going to have to worry about it that much. Blast Radius, rank 0-3, increases damage dealt by Howling Blast by 10, 20, or 30%. Mirror Ball, Anti-Magic Shell also removes all harmful magic effects when activated. So basically it gives you a Cloak of Shadows presence on this. Bad to the Bone, rank 0-3, increase the effectiveness of your Razor Ice Rune Forge by 50%, 50, 100, and 150. This is what I was talking about with the additional artifact power, where Razor Ice, this may end up improving you by quite a bit if you end up taking this on both weapons. Still not sure where the mask's gonna lie until I get to that point later on down the road, but currently it looks pretty solid. And then Ambidexterity. Blah blah. Normally 0-3, increases offhand weapon damage dealt by Frost Strike and Obliterate by 10%, 10, 20, or 30%. So instead of having that reduced damage in the offhand, it's going to get some additional boost to it, which is real nice. And then Hypothermia. Each time Frost Fever deals damage, its damage increases by 10%. This is going to give you some really good ramping. I don't know if there's a cap off on this. There should be somewhere, but this is going to be a nice piece to end up seeing. And I don't know if it's going to be each time Frost Fever deals damage and then it resets after reapplying. It's not that clear. But more than likely, it's either going to be reset on an application, or it's going to just have a general stack modifier like Razor Ice does, to where it goes to X amount and then it stops. With that, guys, that's going to be your artifact and all the abilities, traits that are in it. And then you've got a Frost artifact slot, you've got a Shadow artifact slot, and then a locked Frost artifact slot. So with this, let's go ahead and talk about what everybody wants to hear, the gameplay. The Frost Knight. Ultimately, this is just a very simple, casual spec. If you really don't feel like wasting a lot of energy in playing, this is going to be a great spec for you. Now, what can I say about this? Alright, generally, I'll go over single target and I'll go over AoE rotations, but most of this is going to play together exactly the same. Single target rotation, your main rune spender is going to be Obliterate. What you're looking for with this, though, is actually using it whenever you get Killing Machine procs, because that's going to be the general of how much damage you end up doing. Then you've got Frost Strike, which is going to be your main runic power spender. Actually, it's your only runic power spender. What are we looking at with this? Just once you've got about 50 runic power, you're going to want to start using Frost Strike, and then Obliterate, and then Frost Strike, and then Obliterate, and then in a single target situation, you'll end up wanting to use Howling Blast on your Rime procs. The reason why you only want to use Howling Blast on the Rime procs is for the additional 300% damage, and the fact that it no longer costs a rune, so you get to balance back and forth, mainly between Frost Strike and Obliterate in your building of runic power and everything. Now again, as mentioned, Pillar of Frost is going to be part of your main core rotation. You're going to want to use this on cooldown when it's up, no matter what. I really, especially if you've got Icy Talons, you're capped out on Icy Talons and you're just non-stop swinging like crazy, you're going to see that you're getting more Obliterate procs for, or Killing Machine procs for Obliterate, which is going to make it automatically crit, and that's going to be an automatic reduction in this thing's cooldown. Pillar of Frost, if you took the talent, obviously. With the talents that I took, I did go more of a single target boss fight rotation, and it played out real nice. Then in your AoE situation, basically run the same thing, except you'll add in Remorseless Winter. If you end up having Pillar of Frost up with Remorseless Winter and you took the talent to end up freezing everything, you're going to end up helping out there in an AoE situation. And then you've got Howling Blast. Again, use it on the procs for the extra damage. It hits really damn hard. Most of this thing's damage is going to come from melee. I mean, you get a lot of melee damage out of this spec, and you get a lot of additional frost damage through your abilities because they're non-stop triggering left and right. Does it make it hard? No. As you can see, all I'm mainly doing is going Frost Strike, Obliterate, Frost Strike, Obliterate. Use Obliteration, which is the talented cooldown, Frost Strike, Obliterate. That's generally it. As you're fishing for procs for Howling Blast, which end up happening quite frequently, and then also your Rime procs end up coming up. Now there is a little bit of a timing sequence to where you're not going, if you've still got a decent amount of time on rune generation, and you notice that you're not going to make it if you end up doing like back-to-back Frost Strikes, you do want to end up waiting and timing this because you don't want your Icy Talons to ever fall off. Because that's not only a loss in the melee damage from your auto attacks, but it's also a loss in your damage or your runic power regeneration because you're no longer swinging as fast, and if you took runic attenuation, it's really a mix and match on there. But it's very simple to end up noticing, okay, I just Frost Striked, I don't have an Obliterate, let's wait a few seconds and then we'll Frost Strike again just to restart the cooldown on this thing. Really simple gameplay. Now, on a boss fight, your main thing that you're looking at is obviously the same thing as any single target rotation. There's no real tricks or gimmicks. You're going to want to end up opening up with Pillar of Frost and then go in there and do your Obliterate, and then again, if you did take Obliteration, pop it and just go ahead and run back and forth between Obliterate and Frost Strike just to get that additional damage. And what you'll end up doing while this is all active, you'll do an insane amount of damage, you'll build up a lot of runic power, and then you can go through and apply everything else that's needed. You can get your dots up, which you should have already gotten them up because you should have had a Rime proc somewhere in there, and it's just going to play out really decent. On a boss fight, unless there's ads that come in, just leave Remorseless Winter out. Run your same core rotation that you would, and then if you do get low on runic power or runes, you can pop and power a rune weapon. You'll know when that happens because you won't have anything that's nice and shiny for you to hit down there. You'll end up hitting and power a rune weapon and just start all over with the same rotation, and generally you can end up keeping this up for an extremely long amount of time on a simple gameplay. AoE, again, same difference. Do the single target rotation, and on Rime procs, hit Howling Blast, and add in Remorseless Winter. So basic, it's mind-boggling, but it does do some solid numbers. It is a very calculated spec, I guess you could, not calculated, that's the wrong word. It's basic. It is casual, but it does do some decent damage. No gimmicks involved at all. There's very little RNG involved because of the way that it plays out, And the only major thing, like, you can make this even more basic by not taking Icy Talons and going a different route. But the only main thing that you're really looking at keeping up is going to be Icy Talons. And it's stupid easy. With this, guys, let's go ahead and take a look at the logs and see exactly where it's at. Here we are taking a look at the logs, and as you can see, this was actually the Wrath of Ashara where we had a Lust, and it played out real nice. But Frost Strike, top damage. I mean, automatically top damage with all that rune regen. 22 hits, 42,000 average. Low crit chance on that one, though. As you can see, it really didn't do a whole hell of a lot in the critical side of it, but it was nice to end up seeing it there because that also reduced the Pillar of Frost. And then you've got Howling Blast, which is right there with it also. This thing just procs like crazy. It really does. This is a single target fight, and it just non-stop procs. The Rhyme procs are always there, and you can see that the damage is quite high with it. Also, Obliterate, again, 21,000. Really high amount of damage on it whenever it would end up hitting. And 52% crit on it, but most of that was due to the fact of the Killing Machine procs. Melee, right there with it. Again, Frozen, this is good in two different ways. One, you've got your Icy Talons that are on it, so you're swinging like crazy. You've got 88 casts, 75 hits, because again, you do have a the higher miss chance being a dual wielder. So you do have a miss chance on your melee. But with this, the main thing you're looking at is each one of those hits that I ended up doing was an additional runic power, so it also generated me 75 runic power just out of these melee hits, which is a nice benefit because that's going to push more in. That's 3 more Frost Strikes than I would have ended up getting before. Obliterate, offhand, again, some good damage out of it. You add these two together, and it's obviously going to be top dog by quite a bit. Frost Fever's right in here also. For a dot, I mean a stagnant dot, it does pretty solid for a single target. 6% of your damage, not bad. Razor Ice, this is going to be your rune empowerment from your rune forging. And again, this is just it's a decent little piece. You know, it adds up some decent amount of damage. But at 4.5%, I'm not going to complain too much. This is why I'm saying I'm not sure if Fallen Crusader's made for the offhand anymore, if they want you to go double Razor Ice. I did not test it right now, just for the simple fact I don't think in a shorter fight it's going to matter, because you're going to get that proc up. And I don't know where the internal cooldown, or if there even is one anymore, on Fallen Crusader. But again, I don't know if that's going to end up having anything to play into it. But this is a decent amount, 4% off of there. You could end up doubling it. But you're looking at your main hand switching with your offhand, and it's going to be quite a bit reduced, probably about half of that. So this will only go up about another, 2.25%. Crystalline Swords, yeah, that total is 6% of your damage between both of them, almost 7. It really, for something that just doesn't do anything, you have no control over, they just pop out and do their damage. But it's a decent amount. Now with this, let's go ahead and swap it to, we'll go to Lady Hate Coil. She's got some AoE, and again, Howling Blast is going to just end up taking up, because again, she's got a little bit of an AoE complex to her. Frost Strike, but most of this is all going to stay basically the same. Not a whole hell of a lot of difference. And then you see the Remorseless Winter ticks that are in there also. All in all, the spec does extremely well for a very basic, simple spec. If you don't feel like you're going to be bored with it, it'll be fine. But it is a super casual spec. I mean, there's just baseline damage all the way through and through. There's no gimmicks. There's nothing else to end up playing with except your basic 3-button rotation. How is this playing? It plays fine. Again, like I said, it plays just fine. But what we're really looking at, to me, is I would not be able to play this thing more than probably the first week, just because of how little involvement the spec really ends up taking. That's going to be great for some people, but as for me, I just could not do it. With this, guys, as always, I hope you enjoyed this vid. If you did, you know what to do, and thanks for watching.